Let's go for it. Letter 15. This the Rebbe is writing to a study group. The Rebbe writes, Shalom ubracha. Shalom ubracha means shalom is peace, ubracha is and blessing. I was pleased to learn of the formation of a study group in your community, and I wish you much success. This is in it doesn't say Worcester, Massachusetts. Yeah. Although the name study group implies that study and the acquisition of knowledge are the main objectives of your group, the first step to real understanding of God and the deeper aspects of life is the realization that we cannot and must not make our own understanding a prerequisite condition of our practicing the divine precepts. The Rebbe goes right back to this point. The Rebbe says that while studying is beautiful, when you call it a study group, please understand that we cannot be confined to our understanding of things. We have to understand that that is not a prerequisite to observing divine precepts. In other words, we cannot say to God, let us first understand your laws, then we will follow them. When I understand, then I'll follow it. When our people came into being on receiving the Torah at Mount Sinai, they declared, and this is famous, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do first, then we will understand or try to understand. Understanding comes after doing. There's a commitment we make, and then in that commitment we will try and understand. This proclamation has remained and the reason why is this? We already know from the previous letter. The main reason why this is because a human can't understand so much of what God, of God's infinite wisdom. And it would be ridiculous. It would be really unreasonable for anyone to expect to understand the infinite wisdom of God. A second thing is that by doing, it enables us to understand. Because there's a lot that you can't understand until you experience. So the Jew must observe the mitzvahs whether or not he understands their deeper significance. His experience of the mitzvahs eventually will develop the faculties of his understanding, and in this he has divine assistance. So again, he emphasizes by doing the mitzvahs, that will develop the faculties of understanding, and now you will have divine assistance. God's going to actually give you extra power to be able to understand this mitzvah. Jews have likewise always realized that our history is not shaped by understandable natural laws or forces. Now it's another major point the Rebbe makes here. This, I believe, is one of the fundamental points that the Rebbe emphasized through his leadership. We always realize that our history is not shaped by understandable natural laws or forces, but our history is shaped by supreme providence, which is above and beyond our understanding. To go and explain that the Jewish people even exist today is not logical. There's no reasonable way to explain that. To explain, if you just look at what's going on in the world today, right? The fierce opposition to Israel. It is really shocking that Israel is so powerful right now, despite the unbelievable opposition. Like the whole UN is anti-Israel in the most biased way, right? So they have a clear agenda. And it's amazing that with all of those countries teaming together, Israel remains even stronger than they were before October 7th. Why? Because it's not we are not shaped by understandable and natural laws or forces, but by supreme providence. So we have to understand that our entire basis, if we're going to approach Judaism as Jews with understanding, that's going to be the foundation. We are weakening ourselves terribly. The whole power is that we are connected to an infinite God, not to a finite understanding, to an infinite God. A case in point, and this must have been, let's go back to the time of year. Yeah, the Rebbe wrote this letter. It's addressed on Purim of 1952. So the Rebbe says a case in point is the holiday of Purim, which we celebrate today. So Achashverosh, an absolute ruler, had signed, sealed, and delivered the decree to annihilate the entire Jewish population in all the 127 provinces of his vast empire. So just briefly, you may or may not know the story. Achashverosh was the king during the story of Purim, which was this occurred about 2,400 years ago. Achashverosh ruled over almost the entire world at that time. And so 127 provinces were part of his vast empire. And he sealed a decree to annihilate the entire Jewish people, that any Jew needs to be killed. And that was to happen within a year's time. There seemed not a glimmer of escape. How do you escape this? Every Jew has to be killed. The Jews could not logically understand why such a terrible decree was hanging over their heads. The Jews couldn't understand logically why was this happening. Like, what did they do so terrible that the king wants to kill him? But Haman had accused them of adhering to their own laws and way of life. Why did Haman hate the Jews? Because we live as Jews. We don't live like everyone else. We live as Jews. But if he was right, then precisely for this reason, they should not have become exposed to such mortal danger. The Jewish mind at that time, imagine you're living as a Jew, right? You're serving God. And all of a sudden you find a decree against you that you and your people have to be annihilated because of the way you're living. You're going to ask God, what in the world is going on here? I am serving you. We are serving you. We're doing what you want, infinite God, and that is what's bringing us to our death? Right? Good question. So, if Haman was right, then precisely for this reason, they should not have become exposed to such mortal danger. Inasmuch as the Torah is Torah's Chaim, we call the Torah of life. And the law of life and the way of life, not death. So, any thinking Jewish mind has to question what in the world is going on here. Yet, what did the Jewish people do? They didn't all stop being Jews and living as Jews. They didn't take their mezuzahs, God forbid, down from their doors. Yet during the entire year that the decree was pending, the Jews remained steadfast in their faith and loyalty to God. Although there was but one avenue of escape from certain death, as our sages tell us, that they did have a way to get out. There was an out. What was the out? That was precisely the opposite, abandonment of their way of life and merging with the non-Jewish population. They could have simply said, you know what, we're getting killed for this, we're done. We're going to live like the Gentiles around us, drop the religion. And that would have been very logical. But the Jews did not act logical. Even though they probably had the biggest question in the world, that how is it that the law of life that God has given us is bringing us death? It's almost like the binding of Isaac. God tells Abraham that through Isaac will your offspring continue, and then God says, bring up Isaac as a sacrifice. It's exactly what's happening here. But not a single Jew or Jewess chose this apparently logical solution. During that time, I don't know how many Jews lived during that time. There were millions. And not a single Jew chose this logical approach. Why? Because Jews are not embedded in logic. We are embedded in the infinite. And upon that, we have enormous logic. We're very smart people. We produce amazing things for the world. We analyze and dissect things logically in the most unbelievable way in the Talmud and in Torah study. But that is not our bedrock. That sits on top of our bedrock. The bedrock is faith in the infinite. Their salvation also came through a miraculous chain of events, meaning miraculous, not natural, not logical, which completely turned the wheel of fortune from destruction to renewed life, physical and spiritual, and from mourning to gladness. Now, the words of the Megillah are, these days shall be remembered and practiced. In the Megillah, it says, they wrote the Megillah a year after the whole story of Purim, as a remembrance. And they wrote that these days, the days of Purim, have to be remembered and practiced. And they can be understood better. Remembering our relationship with God must immediately lead to our practicing His precepts. Through practicing God's precepts, despite any inclination to the contrary, stemming from one's inner enemy. So when we practice what God tells us to do, despite any inclination, any pulling from our inner enemy, which is our evil inclination, or external hindrances or influences, the Jew remains rooted in God's Torah and His mitzvahs. That means we become rooted in the infinite. way beyond logic, which make our people indestructible. And this is why we are an indestructible people. All of the logic that secular people bring to the table of being reasonable, all of them are taking us down the wrong path. Is this in alignment with what God wants or not? Alignment with God entrenches us in the indestructible. And if it's alignment with intelligence, which is not aligned with God, then we are going down a very dangerous path because we are deviating from the secret sauce of the Jewish people. I trust that you will follow this true approach and will extend good influences throughout your community with Purim greeting and blessings.